over this weekend, I created a voice bot app that I can ask it to give me the news, and I can ask it questions. If I wanted to build that 4 years ago, yeah, I'd probably need like a team of engineers to figure this out and be able to kind of like take all this.
Hey everybody, I'm Bogdan, co-founder of Blindspot and Lumos House with Andrew and Matej. Welcome to the Lumos House Podcast, and thank you guys for coming. We're doing this stuff to share some insights. We have a lot of founders that visit us and have a lot of questions of how this works at different stages in their career. So we're trying to put something together to help them out. I'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and share a bit of your story coming to where you are today, and let's kick it in from there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name's Kayla. I'm an investor at A4 Capital. It's a pre-seed venture firm based here in San Francisco. And we do pre-seed pretty much exclusively. So investing in founders at the inception stage. Typically they're pre-revenue, often very early on product as well. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I think just learning more about how to support founders through some of those early obstacles that they're facing when they're first launching a company. And I've been with the team for about 2.5 years now.
Cool. No, thanks for having me. I'm Umesh. I am a product lead for new initiatives at Dropbox AI, and I am also a venture scout at Andreessen Horowitz.
If you were to think about what makes you good as an investor, what do you think that specific thing is?
Yeah, I feel like being a previous founder and being an operator, a product lead, PM at various companies, and also an engineer, I've gotten to learn what and how to build decent products, not really good products. I've also learned how to not build products in the worst way possible. And so I think from a lot of those learnings, I've been working with a lot of founders to, one, build their products, figure out what to build, how to sell it, and just being by their side, right? I think there's been multiple times where I get to work with these founders, go to their office, or come to my place and just whiteboard everything together. And so being able to do that, I think, is what makes me, what I hope makes me a good investor and good partner for a lot of these folks.
I think in my experience working in the pre-seed space, I've been able to just get a lot of reps in helping founders navigate some of the early challenges that come with launching their company, not having a lot of sort of tangible progress on paper, helping them understand how to get to that next step, that the business starts to materialize and look a little bit more mature. So yeah, I guess I would hope that founders would see me as a partner, someone that they can trust to lean on in some of the early days of uncertainty associated with getting their company off the ground.
That's really funny how you explain it, and I think that's very valuable for every founder, especially in the early stage, to have somebody they can actually rely with. So I actually heard that your nickname is Cracked. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, one of the founders, she had shared with her investors the cap table spreadsheet that she had. And on there was like the name of the investors that she was looking to get funding from, along with the amount they were going to give, and then a note on why they should or shouldn't take capital from them. I think for mine, again, I don't think I was supposed to see this, so or others supposed to see this, but along my name, it's just a generally cracked period. I thought, cracked used to mean like crackhead energy back in the day, and so I was like, oh no, am I being too hyper? But I think I asked her, and it seems like it's more of a new term slang of being somewhat good. Luckily, I wasn't the only cracked person. There was someone who's like cracked sales and cracked engineer, but it was funny seeing generally cracked. Yeah.
That sounds like King Cracked.
The quote came from a founder who had called me at 2 a.m. She had a problem, and just got up and kind of like went for it. It's something that like continuously doing, and I think that's where that nickname kind of came from.
That's awesome. Kayla, I'm gonna give you the opportunity for the cool part of you, and I'm gonna ask you a bit how you felt about the Terrano stuff afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of got my start in the tech world as a student. I went to school in St. Louis, Missouri, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit barren when it comes to startups generally. I knew that I was interested in doing something in the business world. I wanted to do something that felt more sort of dynamic and creative than going the traditional sort of iBanking consulting route. And that was how I found my way to some early internships working in like sales and ops roles with startups locally. Then my senior year of college, I started interning with an accelerator that was based in St. Louis, and I just loved it. Like, I loved hanging out at the office with the founders so much that I was late for class almost every day because I didn't want to leave. And I think for me, that was like a big light bulb moment when I realized like this is something that I want to pursue long term. And so yeah, got really lucky kind of coming right out of school, was able to join a Midwest-based VC and have been doing that ever since. So yeah, it's been a journey. I think in terms of like what I would want to be known for, probably just, I hope that founders would view me as someone they can kind of rely on to be the first believer, someone who can like support their vision, what they're building when there's not a lot of like tangible progress yet on paper. And early stage investing is something that I've just always really loved.
Awesome. That's super cool. And I remember my first days at Techstars, and I know exactly that vibe at the accelerator where everybody wants to change the world. And there's like, we were in the office, I believe, 20 hours a day, but everybody, including the Techstars staff. So that's an amazing vibe. I'll get back to the Terranos one because every founder is afraid of that specific moment. But both of you deal with early stage a lot. And for founders, that's probably the craziest part of building the company because you have so many unknowns. What do you do with the product? You have all the fears. What if it works? What if it doesn't work? Where do you raise capital? What would you recommend for founders in this space? Because on our last podcast, there were so many comments about this particular moment in the life of a company.
Really?
So like, where would they start in terms of, I guess like resources they should be looking for? Or like,
what would be your advice for an early stage founder to have their life easier and their fears a little bit diminished, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say when you're first getting started, I wouldn't stress too much about like the long term, the big vision. It's important to maybe have that sort of North Star in the back of your mind. But in the early days, I think as a founder, it helps to be a little bit more short term focused on like, what can I accomplish this week? What can I accomplish next week? What can I accomplish this month? And take it day by day from there. If you're speaking to the right investors at that stage, like if you're in the mindset where you're interested in starting a venture-backed company, you'd like to raise capital, the right VCs, I think, will understand that sort of nebulous phase that you're in when you're first getting started. They're not going to pressure you to deliver a lot of like financial progress, a lot of tangible information about all of the customers you've signed, et cetera. I think like the right partners at that stage will be more excited to work with you like through that uncertainty and help you kind of gradually turn the company into something more concrete.
That's cool. No, that's some great advice. Being a founder is really hard, right? I think I've done it twice now, and it's a lot of uncertainties that you can control and also some that you just definitely cannot. Folks, the feedback that I've kind of given to folks that are starting off, if they've never done it before, is just try to figure out what people want to build, right? If you're incredibly passionate about a problem, the rest doesn't matter, right? I've met some incredibly ruthless founders that once they know the problem they want to solve, they're just going at it. They don't care about the money. They don't care about how they're building it. They just want to go, right? I think the vitamin meter idea, which is the medical device, that was great. I was vitamin deficient when I was younger. And so for me, it was, hey, I want to build this so I can help other people. It was spending lights and nights to build this, right? The other company was a fintech company, right? I wanted to help people get access to banking or be able to access corporations. And so how do you do that in such a way without being distracted? It's just by building. Yes, there's meta concerns of how do you have money, how do you get offices, how do you get resources. I think it's nice and we're lucky to be in the Bay Area where everyone's so super giving and and wants to pay it forward, right? I think one of the reasons I became an angel investor and therefore also a scout was to pay it forward to all the folks that had helped us in the past. And there's hundreds of us that just want to help you as you start your company.
Do you think your success as an investor and scout comes from the fact that when you're sourcing the companies and taking them to different venture firms, you're also an investor, so basically that gives an extra boost of confidence, or?
So I'm not an institutional investor, not at all. I think it's a very different job. I think Kayla does a really wonderful job at doing that. I think on a day-to-day, I am an ex-founder and an operator day-to-day, right? I think by being able to go to other firms and obviously I work at Andreessen, so I always show them the deal first, and if they decide to take it, great. If not, then I give it to other organizations that I think would be incredible partners for them. Afore is actually usually my first one that I recommend to, so the team knows that there. But I think to answer your question is, does it give it more say that because I was a founder or because I have that background, it gives a bit more weight? Maybe, I hope so, but I can never know from the investor perspective, of course.
That's actually a very insightful part. So we're here at Tech Week. So there's hundreds of events around town. And there's a ton of early stage founders. I think we've had over 100 of them during the days coming up. What do you think a good advice for a founder coming to Tech Week would be, how to strategize his or hers plan or engagement with the event?
I would say maybe don't index too heavily on a particular outcome. And this is sort of my advice when it comes to events in general. I would say focus more on, or I guess view the event as more of an opportunity to kind of supplement your network and build more high quality connections. And if something tangible results from that, then that's great. But if not, then you never know when those connections are going to come in handy at some point later down the line. So I would think strategically about like, where can you go where there are going to be other really intelligent people in the room, other people who care about the same sorts of problems that you care about, who are working maybe in industries that are similar or parallel to what you're working on. And prioritize those types of events. Something that I personally always find helpful is if I have an invitation to like a 200-person happy hour and like a 15-person dinner, I'm going to go with the 15-person dinner every single time. I think the quality and the depth of the connections that you build when you have more focused one-on-one time with people at these types of events, it's definitely going to deliver a lot more value.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. As would I. But some tangible kind of like ideas for founders during Tech Week anyways, right? We have SF Tech Week, LA and New York. I think there's one in Austin perhaps. I think what I really liked from some of the founders that were visiting, if you're a visiting founder in one of these cities, I would actually try to be strategic and actually set up meetings or coffee chats with investors or folks that you want to meet, right? I had some folks reach out that they were visiting from New York. I think a few were visiting from Austin, and I think one from Miami, funny enough, which is where you're from, yeah. And they reached out just to have coffee during the SF Tech Week because they're already here. For the founders that are already in SF, every week is Tech Week technically, right? And so I feel like the founders that were already in SF, it's nothing new difference. And they're still just like grinding away on a week-to-week basis.
Another topic of discussion is that we've heard a lot during these days is fundraising and how's it shifting? Do you guys see a shift or a transition in the entire fundraising process, approach of venture funds to new deals and angel investors in sourcing new deals? And do you think that the level of the company has to be more mature now in raising capital, or does it have new particularities?
I think it's actually the opposite. I think virtually every firm that I've spoken to, every investor that I've spoken to has validated that they are, in fact, moving earlier than ever before. I think at the pre-seed, we're starting to run up against firms that previously would not touch companies that were pre-product, pre-revenue, and all of a sudden they're willing to kind of throw their hat in the ring, which to me I think signals that there's probably never been a better time in history to be a founder raising a pre-seed round, just because there's so much appetite from investors. I think a lot of it is the AI hype. Everyone kind of wants a piece of the pie. They want to see like the best founders, the best companies first before anyone else does. And so, yeah, I think if anything, most investors are probably a lot more open-minded to working with companies that are a lot more sort of embryonic, I guess you could say, than they have been in the past.
Oh man, there's so many thoughts. I think that's right. I think that there's a lot more founders that are coming out. So I have two thoughts. One big thought is, even though you might not have a full idea or if you're still figuring out the problem space, I think there's a lot of capital flowing around that you can still get access to capital to get that idea started. That being said, there's a few firms that obviously do that. Before is one of the wonderful ones where even if you come in and you have like, hey, I have this problem space, I might not even have a co-founder. I think I've heard stories where you guys help folks find co-founders, which is awesome. That's like one thing that is definitely coming up. I think another thing that is happening though is that when they get to their formal seed round, that I've seen, this might just be me, kind of slowing down. I think when we looked at it from perhaps a year and a half ago, we were seeing a lot of companies that don't really have a defensible moat, right? They're raising millions of dollars on something that someone could probably build over a weekend now. But a year and a half ago, that was the new, oh my goodness, that's so cool. Like how that's gonna like change the thing. And so I think now what's happening is there is a bit of a shift back into understanding, hey, is this product actually solving something, right? I think the framework that I've been using anyways is, number one, is this company solving an actual problem? If they are, my second question is there an incumbent that has solved that question, that problem? There must be, right? And so if you are building something against that incumbent, the next question then is figuring out, do you think you're going to win against that incumbent, right? If you are going to build something and it's leveraging AI, or if it's leveraging something against the incumbent, great. If it's not, then I'll probably pass on that deal. That's kind of how I think about from a seed perspective, or like even a Series A perspective of some companies that, do they have a defensible moat? Because a year and a half ago, if you just had AI stuck onto it, you could raise quite a bit. Now I think people are actually like double clicking into what the company is before they invest.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, especially at the application layer, what the major incumbents, what the big foundational model companies are going to build versus what they're not going to touch. And I think there definitely are some investors who maybe have hesitancies around working with startups who are building at the application layer until that becomes more clear. I think from my view, if the founder is particularly strong, they have a strong instinct for the space that they're building in and a good justification as to why they don't think that the incumbent is going to meddle in that particular space, then I'm always willing to look at it. Because I don't know, there's just so much uncertainty. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so I think indexing too heavily on like, oh, what if OpenAI does this 5 years from now is just not, it's not helpful. And I think it would disqualify a lot of opportunities that could otherwise be really interesting. So I'm less concerned with that, and I think more concerned with the founder's confidence, their ability to sort of navigate this space and eventually deliver something that's unique and different.
Yeah, just to call it when I meant incumbent, I'm thinking more like legacy companies, not actually the big models. So I'm thinking a great example here is there's this company that's helping automate a specific workflow for sales. Right, and it's in Salesforce. So my first question is, hey, like, do you truly believe that Salesforce will not help their customers automate this? Yes, Salesforce is a massive company. People might think they're too slow, but I think they actually have a pretty good shot to automate a lot of things that they want to. Another company, though, that is fixing, I love logistics. So there's a lot of things in logistics that just won't change. Right, I think Flexport did a great job at this, where we were able to really take a lot of the processes that we knew wouldn't change for a long time and able to automate that back in a few years ago. Now the next gen is coming out, which is folks are figuring out how do you automate a lot of the logistics portions that even those legacy companies obviously won't do. Maybe Flexport will do, but that's kind of what I'm talking about, which is, do you believe there's going to be a legacy company that's actually going to do it or not? And if they're not, amazing. This is definitely a problem you should help dig into and solve. But if they are, then I'm curious on how they think about it as well.
That's actually super interesting because there's basically two different approaches up to a point. So my next question is, I agree with the part that everything that had AI taped on it was getting funded, and I think some should not have been funded. But I also agree with the fact that there's so much to develop in the AI field, and AI has so many applications in literally every aspect of our lives that there's still room to grow. However, do you see a new trend starting to develop post-AI? Because looking down in history, you've had video coming up and you've had social networks that were the thing, and now AI is the thing. And what do you guys think the next thing is going to be? Because it comes from from here.
I have an interesting take on this. It was funny, I was talking about this with another investor a couple of days ago. A couple of years ago, if you wanted to build an e-commerce company, right, you'd actually raise quite a lot of money, build your entire e-commerce system, and then sell a product. Then Shopify came along and said, hey, we can actually help you with this for $40 a month, right? And that changed everything. I feel like that's what's happening right now as well, right? If over this weekend, I created a voice bot app that I can ask it to give me the news and I can ask it questions. If I wanted to build that 4 years ago, yeah, I'd probably need like a team of engineers to figure this out and be able to kind of like take all this. But now I was able to build it over the weekend using Replit, right? So there's a lot more advancements that are coming out where I think I believe we're going to see a lot more businesses that might not necessarily need startup capital or not venture capital anyways, that will actually make a lot of money by being lifestyle businesses. And so as this trend happens, I'm curious on who the folks are or who the startups are that are going to help them do that, right? Replit's a great example. They're able to help you create ops. Even if you're not technical, and be able to do that really well and ship that for sell another one. But now I'm thinking, like, candidly, is like, when you think about payments and all that, or if you think about banking, regulation, compliance, who's going to help them also do that, right? There's obviously great options already, but I think there could be better. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at the moment.
Yeah, I have a very similar perspective, I think, and probably the next kind of post-initial AI hype, I think what we'll notice is software just becomes trivially easy to build. Anyone who wants to start a software company, technical or not, will be able to do that relatively easily. And so I think from the perspective of an investor, where traditionally we might index really heavily on the technical talent that a team is bringing to the table, I think it's probably going to shift more towards like the go-to market and the commercial edge that team is bringing to the table. I think that's how companies will be able to differentiate and stand out more so if they have some sort of interesting angle to reach their customers to achieve scale in a way that their competitors are not. I think being able to understand the needs of their particular customer base more intuitively, more deeply, more quickly than the competitors will enable companies to succeed. So yeah, I think we'll probably see maybe less of an emphasis on who's building the software and more of an emphasis on like who's guiding the strategy of the company, who's running the distribution engine, et cetera.
I think that's like so accurate right now, and I'm seeing this firsthand. We're launching a product at Dropbox AI, which is where I've been working. And looking back, if we were to launch the same product, which is an enterprise search product, outside of Dropbox, right, it'd be really hard. You're essentially going up against businesses that need to rely on you for security, data, and like reliability, and then also have that trust to do that. Being at Dropbox and having that Dropbox brand behind you and having that distribution channel just makes it obviously a lot more easier. And I think that's kind of what I'm also looking for into companies, where you can create the most awesome product, but if you don't know how to distribute it, you're kind of screwed.
This ties into the next question. You mentioned that you wouldn't necessarily need to have technical skills to build software moving forward. And I agree, I see that. But what do you think where do you think the developer will transition to? Because it sounds a bit scary in context if you're a developer, but we all know when we build startups and products that they are probably one of the key ingredients.
Yeah, I think a helpful analogy, and one example of a space where you're seeing a lot of automation right now is in law, right? I think you're seeing a lot of companies like Harvey and similar who are trying to essentially automate a lot of the lower level legal work that a paralegal or somebody similar would be doing. The advantage of this is it frees the legal team up to have more time to think in terms of like high level strategy. How are they going to approach this case? Because they're not wasting so much time with kind of the nitty gritty of like reading through evidence documents and outlining a frame for the case, et cetera. And so I think it will be similar when it comes to developers. Ideally, we'll have agents writing most of the code, doing most of the more kind of mundane, repetitive workflows, and ideally it will free up the sort of brain capacity of the average developer to think more at a more sort of high level strategic perspective. How can they really guide the direction of the product? And so I think you'll probably see a lot of developers able to take on more kind of like a creative role within the company that they work for, helping their team sort of navigate what should we be prioritizing in terms of new additions to the product and making sure that those releases go as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I just want to be crystal clear. I think you definitely do need engineers or some sort of technical like background to build these venture-backed companies. I think my call though is I think if you're not trying to build a venture-backed company, I think you can go a pretty long way without after having to hire an engineer. Right? This example of the voice bot AI, it works, but is it scalable? Absolutely not. It will break like after a few minutes, and that's because we were able to kind of like prototype this and really set this up really fast. And so that's kind of like how I think about it, which is like we might get to a world where it might not stop breaking after a while, but I think it's not going to replace engineering jobs per se. If that is my end quote.
I just love the focus on creativity. I think the more, as a human species, the more we get a chance to focus and be more creative rather than repetitive and boring or not necessarily boring, but time-consuming in our day-to-day lives, I think that will generate some pretty amazing stuff in the future. So that's an amazing angle. So now, coming back to the Theranos moment, one of the greatest fears in the life of every founder is the moment when your company, you no matter how successful you are, you still have it in the back of your head. What if that happens? How's that feeling? How do you handle it? And how do you pull yourself back up from that?
It was tough. I think when I like look back and I think about like all the best investors that I've backed or got to work with, there's usually three characteristics that usually stick out, and I think those three characteristics are the reason that even if that happened to them, they'd be fine. The first one is they're able to sell, right? Being a founder is technically a selling job. You're selling your employees to join you. You're selling to companies to use you, and you're selling to investors to give you money. I think the second thing is like just speed. Speed is critical, right? You can build the most amazing product, and if you're 10th to build it versus the first, even though you've been working on it for 6-7 months ahead of everyone, like tough luck, right? We're already seeing that with a lot of the companies that are coming out in the AI space. And I think the last one is like resiliency. There's this quote from like back in my Shopify days where it's really just like 3 words: get shit done, right? If I asked you to draw an owl, and this is like a Shopify term, so for those listening, if I asked you to draw an owl, instead of like doing 7-8 back and forths of like how should I draw the owl or like what should I do, just fucking do it, right? I think Shopify was notorious for doing this, where they trusted their employees to figure it out. They trusted their employees to come with solutions and be able to actually do that work. And I think some of the best founders are the ones that can figure that out. Obviously, everyone needs a helping hand, so don't worry about that. But I think it's the best ones that like are able to think across the board, go fast, and be able to really sell everything.
Yeah, I think one of the key attributes of the most successful founders that I've had the opportunity to witness their kind of journey personally is willingness to pivot. I think when you run into an obstacle that's sort of, Theranos-esque or FTS-esque, probably the worst mistake that you can make is just getting too married to that original idea to the point that you don't have the flexibility to experiment or try anything new. So yeah, I think just constantly keeping an open mind and like going into any new venture with the mindset that like, okay, there's more than likely the current idea that I'm working on right now is not going to pan out long term. So have that willingness to try to experiment with different ideas, always come in with sort of a plan B in the back of your head, and yeah, be able to move quickly, iterate quickly, try something new as soon as the first thing doesn't work.
Awesome, that's great advice. What's the craziest investment you've made, and how did that work?
I have one. Yeah. It's a company called Aquila Earth. They're in Australia. And so their pitch was, how do you keep drones and vehicles, electric vehicles, running for a really long time without needing to actually charge them? And the way they've done it is with a really high-powered laser. And so you have a drone that's, say it's running here, and you want to monitor this entire area. What would have to happen is like every hour, every 30 minutes, whatever, you'll have to come to docking station, charge, and maybe they can like rip in place and have it deploy another one. Instead, what they have is a base station, which shoots a really strong laser into a specific area in that drone, and that's charging them while it's flying, so it doesn't have to land ever. Yeah, they have it working to some degree, to some distance anyways, but the goal is that you can technically charge flying drones, but also electric vehicles without ever having to do that, right? The same operation kind of also applies to roads. If you're on a road, laser shoots up or into the car, you never have to stop because the power from the laser is stronger than the power being used to power. Definitely a crazy one. Yeah, definitely a crazy one. Really incredible founder. And I think they're going to do some really cool stuff, especially in like the agriculture and potentially even the defense space. But I'm more excited about the agriculture side of it.
Yeah, I invest in B2B SaaS, so I might not have a great answer to this question. But there's one space that I've recently taken an interest in that if you had told me maybe like 6 months to a year ago that I would be taking an interest in this space, I would have thought you were crazy. But more like electricity and utilities. I think for a lot of companies, as their electricity usage has kind of skyrocketed as they're spending more and more time with AI, there's become an increasing demand for technology that allows them to use electricity more efficiently. So yeah, one company that I had the opportunity to invest in recently, the founders are coming out of Waterloo actually. They're building a SaaS platform for electricity plants. Very unsexy space, definitely, selling into utilities, but I think what I liked about it was nobody else was doing this. Nobody else had this idea to sell risk software directly to utilities. And so they're using tools that can essentially automate a lot of the more sort of manual workflows that go on within an electricity plant. Everything from reporting on the status of different assets, different components of the grid, to help the plant get more funding from local governments, to also being able to flag when different types of assets might need preventative maintenance to avoid downtime and things along those lines, where there's more need for that as there's kind of an increasing level of strain on the grid. So yeah, that's a cool space that I've been spending more time on recently.
That's actually moving into the next subject. So that's amazing that you put it like that, because one of my debates that I had with my co-founder the other day is how come actual problems that get actual fixes, like this example, why don't they become more sexy in the investment space? I don't know, pet healthcare, there's an actual need for that, or stuff that makes the day-to-day life easier, but it's not as sexy as OpenAI and walking robots that fold clothes.
Yeah, I think unsexy spaces are often unsexy for a reason, right? Like with the utilities example, it's difficult to build a venture scale business in that space because it's difficult to sell to utilities as a customer, right? The sales cycles are long, go-to market is not straightforward, you're selling to people who are traditionally not frequent SaaS buyers. And so it makes sense, like why a lot of VCs who are maybe like a little more inclined to reduce their risk with respect to commercialization might want to stay away from that. And I think that the same is true for lots of other spaces, like companies that are building tech where you're selling into manufacturing or more kind of industrial spaces where they're not typically purchasing a lot of software. On the other hand, if you're looking at something more sexy like AI for consumer, there's a playbook there, right? It's still risky, but a lot of founders have that experience of knowing how to build, how to distribute a consumer product. It feels more straightforward, and it might feel less risky to an investor who has experience building companies and with that particular go-to-market angle. So I think the hurdle for founders, if you're building in a space that traditionally is less favored or maybe does not attract as much venture funding, is being able to demonstrate like what is the unique angle that you and your team are bringing to the table that allows you to reach these customers that have traditionally been unreachable. So what is your unique insight about how best to communicate that to them, how best to sort of illustrate the need, and how to actually close and execute on contracts where maybe other companies have not been as successful?
Yeah, I might be weird. I feel like every business is like a sexy business. Right? I think like logistics, Flexport. I was fascinated by all that. The way I think about it is like a lot of these companies are actually behind the scenes. A lot of the sexy per se companies, right? If we think about like the fintech space, there's so many companies that give you loans or give you like cool things. Like Built is awesome as well, right? But behind the scenes, you need that KYC, that fraud, that KYB systems that no one really knows about, right? I used to work at a company called Middesk where we did KYB verifications for businesses. Not sexy at all. But without that, you've now limited so many businesses to become sexy and actually be able to help businesses and people, right? I think going back to like the very first point, which was, are we solving a real problem, right? And it might not be the problem that you and I think about as everyday people, but the businesses that are starting to create these solutions for the problems that we have, they have their own problems. And so are you solving their problems at least? And if you're not solving their problems, are you solving the problem behind them? And so there's like a continuous loop of like, you know, whose problem are you actually solving? Yeah, I think if you're, in my eyes, if you're solving any problem, that's sexy to me. So that's kind of my take.
Cool. Final question. An advice for founders watching the show, if they would like to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you, and what's the best way to get under your skin, basically?
If you have a path to a warm intro, I think not just for me, but for any investor that you're speaking to, I would say find the path to the warm intro. Try to get creative, try to get resourceful, find which friend of a friend can put you in touch with that particular VC, because it just helps kind of get your message skyrocketed to the top of their inbox. So I would always recommend that as a first step. That being said, I'm not opposed to cold outreach. I've done a lot of cold outreach in my day, and so I know that there's a lot of value that can come from that. I would say in a first message, I think the most important thing that you can do is highlight any unique attributes about yourself, your team, the skill set that you're bringing to the table, and in a very kind of like short, punchy way, like what is unique, what is different about what you're building and your approach to commercialization. So I think if I can get those sort of main points out of a cold message, that's usually what helps kind of help me feel excited enough to reach back out and continue the conversation. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about A4, we have a number of resources and programs for idea stage, inception stage founders. You can apply for our accelerator on our website, a4.vc/residence, or feel free to reach out directly to me via LinkedIn. Also happy to chat that way.
Cool. Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect. My email is also on my LinkedIn, but just send me what problem you're solving. If it's something that I also believe in or I can like dig into, I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. And basically, this was Lumos House Talks.